Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Wait a minute, I just got a real shock here. We ran out of book. How could it happen? How could that have happened? Look how thin the pages are. It's impossible. It's Zeno's law. You can't actually get to the end of anything. Isn't it? You'd have to use calculus to disprove that. We're very fortunate to still be alive and in the Dham. And I'd like to show you the next volume. It's not that we haven't tried. We've showed up. We worked a little bit, but Krishna did his magic and he let us go through the first volume of the third canto. That puts us in the coveted situation of starting at chapter 17. And that's not nothing because there's 33 chapters in the entire canto. So we're starting off with victory of Hiraṇyākṣa over all the directions of the universe. This is Shamyaprasa's favorite chapter. First we offer our obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and following in his footsteps, we aspire to, with the same alacrity in which he wrote his books, we would like to emulate that enthusiasm by someday reading at the same pace that he wrote them. Hare Krishna. Chapter 17, Victory of Hiraṇyākṣa over all the directions of the universe. Sri Maitreya said, the demigods, the inhabitants of the higher planets, were freed from all fear upon hearing the cause of the darkness explained by Brahma, who was born from Vishnu. Thus they all returned to their respective planets. The demigods who are denizens of higher planets are also very much afraid of incidents such as the universe's becoming dark, and so they consulted Brahma. This indicates that the quality of fear exists for every living entity in the material world. The four principal activities of material existence are eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. The fear element exists also in the demigods. On every planet, even in the higher planetary systems, including the moon and the sun, as well as on this earth, the same principles of animal life exist. Otherwise, why are the demigods also afraid of darkness? The difference between the demigods and ordinary human beings is that the demigods approach authority, whereas the inhabitants of this earth defy authority. If people would only approach the authority, then every adverse condition in this universe could be rectified. Arjuna was also disturbed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but he approached the authority, Krishna, and his problem was solved. The conclusive instruction of this incident is that we may be disturbed by some material condition, but if we approach the authority who can actually explain the matter, then our problem is solved. The demigods approached Brahma for the meaning of the disturbance, and after hearing from him, they were satisfied and returned home peacefully. The virtuous lady Diti had been very apprehensive of trouble to the gods from the children in her womb, and her husband predicted the same. She brought forth twin sons after a full 100 years of pregnancy. On the birth of the two demons, there were many natural disturbances, all very fearful and wonderful, in the heavenly planets, the earthly planets, and in between them. There were earthquakes along the mountains and the earth, and there were earthquakes along the mountains on the earth, and it appeared that there was fire everywhere. Many inauspicious planets, like Saturn, appeared, along with comets, meteors, and thunderbolts. Purport: when natural disturbances occur on a planet, one should understand that a demon must have taken birth there. In the present age, the number of demoniac people is increasing. Therefore, natural disturbances are also increasing. There is no doubt about this, as we can understand from the statements of the Bhagavatam. There blew winds which were most uninviting to the touch, hissing again and again and uprooting gigantic trees. They had storms for their armies and clouds of dust for their ensigns. Purport: when there are natural disturbances like blowing cyclones, too much heat or snowfall, and uprooting of trees by hurricanes, it is to be understood that the demoniac population is increasing, and so the natural disturbance is also taking place. There are many countries on the globe, even at the present moment, where all these disturbances are current. This is true all over the world. There is sufficient sunshine, and there are always clouds in the sky, snowfall, and severe cold. These assure that such places are inhabited by demoniac people who are accustomed to all kinds of forbidden, sinful activity. The luminaries in the heavens were screened by masses of clouds, in which lightning sometimes flashed as though laughing. Darkness reigned everywhere, and nothing could be seen. The ocean with its high waves wailed aloud as if stricken with sorrow, and there was a commotion among the creatures inhabiting the ocean. The rivers and lakes were also agitated, and lotuses withered. Misty halos appeared around the sun and the moon during solar and lunar eclipses again and again. Claps of thunder were heard even without clouds, and sounds like those of rattling chariots emerged from the mountain caves. In the interior of the villages, she-jackals yelled portentously, vomiting strong fire from their mouths, and jackals and owls also joined them with their cries. Raising their necks, dogs cried here and there, now in the matter of singing and now of wailing. O Vidura, the asses ran hither and thither in herds, striking the earth with their hard hooves and wildly braying. Asses also feel very respectable as a race. And when they run in flocks hither and thither in so-called jollity, it is understood to be a bad sign for human society. Frightened by the braying of the asses, birds flew shrieking from their nests, while cattle in the cowsheds as well as in the woods passed dung and urine. Cows, terrified, yielded blood in place of milk. Clouds rained pus. The images of the gods in the temples shed tears, and trees fell down without a blast of wind. Ominous planets such as Mars and Saturn shone brighter and surpassed the auspicious ones such as Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus, as well as a number of lunar mansions. Taking seemingly retrograde courses, the planets came in conflict with one another. The entire universe is moving under the three modes of material nature. Those living entities who are in goodness are called the pious species, pious lands, pious trees, etc. It is similar with the planets also. Many planets are considered pious and others are considered impious. Saturn and Mars are considered impious. When the pious planets shine very brightly, it is an auspicious sign. But when the inauspicious planets shine very brightly, this is not a very good sign. Marking these and many other omens of evil times, everyone but the four sage sons of Brahma, who were aware of the fall of Jai and Vijay, and of their birth as Diti's sons, were seized with fear. They did not know the secrets of these portents and thought that the dissolution of the universe was at hand. According to Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, the laws of nature are so stringent that it is impossible for the living entity to surpass their enforcement. It is also explained that those who are fully surrendered to Krishna in Krishna consciousness can be saved. We can learn from the description of the Srimad Bhagavatam that it is because of the birth of two great demons that there were so many natural disturbances. It is to be indirectly understood, as previously described, that when there are constant disturbances on the earth, that is an omen that some demoniac people have been born, or that the demoniac population has increased. In former days there were only two demons, those born of ditthi. Yet there were so many disturbances. At the present day, especially in this age of Kali, these disturbances are always visible, which indicates that the demoniac population has certainly increased. To check the increase of demoniac population, the Vedic civilization enacted so many rules and regulations of social life, the most important of which is the Garbhadhana process for begetting good children. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna informed Krishna that if there is unwanted population, Varna Sankara, the entire world will appear to be hell. People are very anxious for peace in the world, but there are so many unwanted children born without the benefit of the Garbhadhana ceremony, just like the demons born from Ditthi. Ditthi was so lusty that she forced her husband to copulate at a time which was inauspicious, and therefore the demons were born to create disturbances. In having sex life to beget children, one should observe the process for begetting nice children. If each and every householder and every family observes the Vedic system, then there are nice children, not demons, and automatically there is peace in the world. If we do not follow regulations in life for social tranquility, we cannot expect peace. Rather, we will have to undergo the stringent reactions of the material laws. These two demons, we will have to undergo the stringent reactions of natural laws. I'll read the whole sentence again. If we do not follow regulations in life for social tranquility, we cannot expect peace. Rather, we will have to undergo the stringent reactions of natural laws. We should follow the regulations for social tranquility. Seems to be quite a bit of that nowadays, huh? Social tranquility? Not so much? Everyone's so tranquil, so peaceful, so happy, satisfied. Otherwise, we'll have to undergo the stringent reactions of natural laws. That doesn't seem to be a problem. 16. These two demons who appeared in ancient times soon began to exhibit uncommon bodily features. They had steel-like frames which began to grow just like two great mountains. There are two classes of men in the world. One is called the demon and the other is called the demigod. The demigods concern themselves with the spiritual upliftment in human society, whereas the demons are concerned with physical and mental and material upliftment. The two demons born of Ditthi began to make their bodies as strong as iron frames, and they were so tall that they seemed to touch outer space. They were decorated with valuable ornaments, and they thought that this was success in life. Originally, it was planned that Jai and Vijay, the two doorkeepers of Vaikuntha, were to take birth in this material world, whereas by the curse of the sages, they were to play the part of always being angry with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As demoniac persons, they became so angry that they were not concerned with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but simply with physical comforts and physical upliftment. They didn't go to Gurukul. Their bodies became so tall that they seemed to kiss the sky with the crests of their gold crowns. They blocked the view of all directions and while walking shook the earth at every step. Their arms were adorned with brilliant bracelets, and they stood as if covering the sun with their waists, which were bound with excellent and beautiful girdles. Purport: in the demoniac way of civilization, people are interested in getting a body constructed in such a way that when they walk on the street, the earth will tremble. And when they stand, it will appear that they cover the sun and the vision of the four directions. If a race appears strong in body, their country is materially considered to be among the highly advanced nations of the world. I'm just flipping through the photos. Not to look at each one, but just to get to the end of them. Kashyapa Prajapati, the creator of the living entities, gave his twin sons their names. The one who was born first he called Hiraṇyākṣa, and the one who was first conceived by Diti he named Hiraṇyākṣipu. There is an authoritative Vedic literature called Pinda Siddhi, in which the scientific understanding of pregnancy is very nicely described. It is stated that when the male secretion enters the menstrual flux in the uterus in 2 successive drops, the mother develops 2 embryos in her womb, and she brings forth twins in a reverse order to that in which they were first conceived. The child conceived first is born later, and the one conceived later is brought forth first. The first child conceived in the womb lives behind the second child. So, when birth takes place, the second child appears first, and the first child appears second. That's Philo. Yeah. Managerial accounting. In this case, it is understood that Hiraṇyākṣa, the second child conceived, was delivered first, whereas Hiraṇyākṣipu, the child who was behind him, having been conceived first, was born second. The elder child, Hiraṇyākṣipu, was unafraid of death from anyone within the 3 worlds because he received a benediction from Lord Brahma. He was proud and puffed up due to this benediction, and was able to bring all 3 planetary systems under his control. Purport: as will be revealed in later chapters, Hiraṇyākṣipu underwent severe austerity and penance to satisfy Brahma and thus receive a benediction of immortality. Actually, it is impossible even for Lord Brahma to give anyone the benediction of becoming immortal. But indirectly, Hiraṇyākṣipu received the benediction that no one within this material world would be able to kill him. In other words, because he originally came from the abode of Vaikuntha, he was not to be killed by anyone within this material world. The Lord desired to appear himself to kill him. One may be very proud of his material advancement in knowledge, but he cannot be immune to the 4 principles of material existence, namely birth, death, old age, and it was the Lord's plan to teach people that even Hiraṇyākṣipu, who was so powerful and strongly built, could not live more than his destined duration of life. One may become as strong and puffed up as Hiraṇyākṣipu and bring under his control all the 3 worlds, but there is no possibility of continuing life eternally or keeping the conquered booty forever. So many emperors have ascended to power, and they are now lost in oblivion. That is the history of the world. His younger brother, Hiraṇyākṣa, was always ready to satisfy his elder brother by his activities. Hiraṇyākṣa took a club on his shoulder and traveled all over the universe with a fighting spirit just to satisfy Hiraṇyākṣipu. The demoniac spirit is to train all family members to exploit the resources of this universe for personal sense gratification, whereas the godly spirit is to engage everything in the service of the Lord. Hiraṇyākṣipu was himself very powerful, and he made his younger brother, Hiraṇyākṣa, powerful to assist him in fighting with everyone and lording it over material nature as long as possible. If possible, he wanted to rule the universe eternally. These are demonstrations of the spirit of the demoniac living entity. Hiraṇyākṣa's temper was difficult to control. He had anklets of gold tinkling about his feet. He was adorned with a gigantic garland, and he rested his huge mace on one of his shoulders. Anklets of gold He was adorned with a gigantic garland, and he rested his huge mace on one of his shoulders. His mental and bodily strength, as well as the boon conferred upon him, made him proud. He feared death at the hands of no one, and there was no checking him. The gods, therefore, were seized with fear at his very sight, and they hid themselves even as snakes hide themselves for fear of Garuda. Purport: the asuras are generally strongly built, as described here, and therefore their mental condition is very sound, and their prowess is also extraordinary. Hiraṇyākṣa and Hiraṇyākṣipu, having received the boon that they would not be killed by any other living entity within this universe, were almost immortal, and thus they were completely fearless. Hummingbird nectar. On not finding Indra and the other demigods, who had previously been intoxicated with power, the chief of the Daityas, seeing that they had all vanished before his might, roared loudly. After returning from the heavenly kingdom, the mighty demon, who was like an elephant in wrath, for the sake of sport, dived into the deep ocean, which was roaring terribly. On his entering the ocean, the aquatic animals, who formed the host of Varuna, were stricken with fear and ran far away. Thus Hiraṇyākṣa showed his splendor without dealing a blow. Purport: materialistic demons sometimes appear to be very powerful and are seen to establish their supremacy throughout the world. Here also it appears that Hiraṇyākṣa, by his demoniac strength, actually established his supremacy throughout the universe, and the demigods were afraid of his uncommon power. Not only were the demigods in space afraid of the demons, Hiraṇyākṣipu and Hiraṇyākṣa, but so also were the aquatic animals within the sea. Moving about in the ocean for many, many years, the mighty Hiraṇyākṣa smote the gigantic wind-tossed waves again and again with his iron mace and reached Vibhavāri, the capital of Varuna. Varuna is supposed to be the predominating deity of the waters, and his capital, which is known as Vibhavāri, is within the watery region. Vibhavāri is the home of Varuna, lord of the aquatic creatures and guardian of the lower regions of the universe, where the demons generally reside. There Hiraṇyākṣa fell at Varuna's feet like a low-born man, and to make fun of him, he said with a smile, "Give me battle, O Supreme Lord." The demoniac person always challenges others and tries to occupy others' property by force. Here, these symptoms were fully displayed by Hiraṇyākṣa, who begged war from a person who had no desire to fight. You were the guardian of an entire sphere and a ruler of wide fame, having crushed the might of arrogant and conceited warriors, and having conquered all the Daityas and Danavas in the world, you once performed a Rajasuya sacrifice to the Lord. Thus mocked by an enemy whose vanity knew no bounds, the worshipful Lord of the waters waxed angry, but by dint of his reason he managed to curb the anger that had sprung up in him. And he replied, "O dear one, we have now desisted from warfare, having grown too old for combat." Purport: as we see, warmongering materialists always create fighting without reason. You are so skilled in war that I do not see anyone else but the most ancient person, Lord Vishnu, who can give satisfaction in battle to you. Therefore, chief of the Asuras, approach him, whom even heroes like you mentioned with praise. Purport: aggressive materialistic warriors are actually punished by the Supreme Lord for their policy of unnecessarily disturbing world peace. Therefore, Varuna advised Hiraṇyākṣa that the right course to satisfy his fighting spirit would be to fight to seek to fight with Vishnu. Varuna continued, on reaching him, you will be rid of your pride at once and will lie down on the field of battle surrounded by dogs for eternal sleep. It is in order to exterminate wicked fellows like you and to show his grace to the virtuous that he assumes his various incarnations like Varaha. Purport. Asuras do not know that their bodies consist of the 5 elements of material nature, and that when they fall, they become objects of pastimes for dogs and vultures. Varuna advised Hiraṇyākṣa to meet Vishnu in his boar incarnation, so that his hankering for aggressive war would be satisfied and his powerful body would be vanquished. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 17th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Victory of Hiraṇyākṣa over all the directions of the world. Bravo! Sadhu, sadhu. Bravissimo. Now let's see if there's any reflections or questions. Bana and then Samya Prash.
So Prabhupada earlier that Hiraṇyākṣa was the one first conceived, although he was born second. So, but he's still called the elder brother, even though he was born second. For that reason.
Correct.
Is that accepted by, like, does modern society also follow that, or?
Let me check. Hey Siri. When twins are born, which ones? I didn't ask anything yet. Hold on. Hey Siri. When twins are born, which is considered to be the eldest? The one born first or the one born second?
Here's what I found.
Which twin is the oldest? That's Cora. It's useless.
Democracy.
Who's the oldest? The second born twin is actually the oldest. Of course, it's the internet. It's always right. But that's the consensus here.
Okay.
Which twin is the oldest, the one who is born first or second? To the Western mindset, the answer is straightforward, but in northern Ivory Coast, things are seen a little bit differently. There, the second born twin is actually older.
So sounds like there's a
difference of opinion.
Discrepancy. And maybe there's a discrepancy between Eastern, Western civilization or something.
Yeah.
And also I thought that it says both of the devotees, both of the demons got the benediction that they wouldn't be killed by any other living entity. I thought it was just Hiraṇyākṣa.
Well, we read earlier that they would be killed by the Lord himself because Diti became ecstatic upon hearing that. That was the main point.
Yeah,
they would be killed by the Lord.
Right. Well, we read one of the texts said that they were fearless because both of them got the benediction. They couldn't be killed.
Sure, you want to go back and look?
Yeah.
That says both of them?
Yeah.
You did already?
Yeah.
Okay. And there it is. Okay, that's it. Samya Prash.
Interesting how, even though the demigods didn't really have a solution, in fact, Brahma said, there is no solution. This is beyond my control. This is just supposed to happen. The fact that it was explained to them what was happening put their mind at ease. In the first purport, Prabhupada talks about if you approach an authority who can explain the matter, then you can be peaceful. So it seems like it's just interesting that so much of our mental anxiety is from the unknown, where if somebody can explain to us, well, it's actually like this. It's actually a divine Leela where two people are going to cause tremendous harm and trouble, but it's all part of a thing that's supposed to happen. So it's gonna be terrible, but it's supposed to be this way. then it becomes less troublesome than if you just try to make up your own mind of what could possibly be going on here.
Yeah, and if you just flip the switch into that as the default mode, then you've got tattenu kampam susimikshimano.
I was thinking about how the demons cause such a disturbance to not just people, but to the nature, like natural disturbances happen because a demon is taking birth. And then I was thinking of those hurricanes that we've had one after another in Florida and the southeast.
Yeah.
It's a little scary.
Definitely. And just the bullying mentality. It's so well expressed here in this section when Hiraṇyākṣa goes before Varuna and mockingly says, "Give me battle." And it's just indicative of the demoniac spirit that they want to bully other people. Yeah, that's right.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. It's related to the same point that you were just mentioning about how Varuna, he controlled his anger by reason.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how to cultivate more of that, because I have a short temper, and I was thinking that's so wonderful that, he's capable, he's a demigod, and he's empowered by the Lord to fight, but he considered the circumstance, and he did not lose his temper or even say that I can fight, or he didn't even give it any importance. He said that Supreme Lord will take care of this. So, but we often have the tendency to try and control the situation or do what I can do, etc.
Yeah, you have to have a plan. And you have to plan ahead, knowing that anger will arise at various intervals. And if you have a plan ahead of time, then when anger arises, then you'll have intelligence. If you're having thought about it ahead of time, and preemptively, you'll notice, oh, this is that time I was planning for. And then you can take refuge in your intelligence, say, I'm going to follow my plan. Someone with a good plan can outsmart even a genius. So, as an example, in relationships, let's just say you live with a significant other, and there's a possibility that there can be a difference of opinion. And there's a possibility that when there's a difference of opinion, there could be a sense of rising emotion. So far, so good? If those two get together and discuss at a time when they're in their right minds, just like when people sign a document bequeathing their property to someone, they say, I am now in my right state of mind. When you're in your right state of mind and you make a plan, those two make a plan together, and they say, when we have a difference of opinion and emotions rise, we're going to recognize it and say, and then you'll have a plan that we won't escalate it. And there's some ways, like there's a whole system called nonviolent communication. And the author opines that the main cause of acrimony in an argument between two people is that one or both ascribe intention. They say, you meant to do this, or they imply that. And if you take that out of the equation and describe what happened without ascribing intention to the other person's action, then it makes it innocuous. And it tends not to escalate. I'm just giving these as examples because if you discuss this ahead of time with the other person that you live with, as an example, and then something comes up, at that time, because you have a plan, you'll have this dual awareness that, you'll have a collective awareness that this is one of those times, and then there's a refuge that you can take from the anger. So it's a good idea to plan ahead, and even for one's personal interaction with the world, if you decide ahead of time. For instance, I'll give you another practical example, going on book distribution. If you go on book distribution and you have the attitude that everybody has to submit to my will, then there's going to be a sense of frustration that will lead to anger. I felt it myself. I remember times when my main purpose was to make sure everybody took a book because I had a personal interest that I wanted to score a certain level. I wasn't so interested in them. I was more interested in myself. And therefore, the field was ripe for me to have an inappropriate emotional reaction. However, if I change the context and the goal and say that I'm only going out for my personal purification, and my objective is to leave everyone with a good impression, then my experience is much different, because then when somebody rejects me or even is disrespectful, then I feel, oh good, there came I planned ahead. That's my purification time. And I'll also go out of my way to make sure that I don't act in a passive-aggressive way in order to barb them, but rather I remember my plan to leave them with a good impression. And that way it changed the situation. So Lord Chaitanya says, have a plan to show respect to everybody and not have and respect for yourself. If you make that your plan, and Kaviraj Goswami says, make it your main plan and just hang it around your neck. So that's your main thing. And then walk around the world and see if you have a different experience than you did before with that kind of a plan in mind. And that makes the world a place where I saw once I took a class at San Francisco State University called Psychosomatic Optimization. It was part of the psychology. It was a class in the psychology department, which I took as an elective. And in it, the professor showed these biofeedback machines. They're still around, I think. They're probably more advanced than they were in the 60s and 70s, but they were very effective in training people the relationship between their body and their mind. Because the what do we call them, readers or sensors, biosensors, that were strategically placed throughout the body then would give a digital reading, or they would show how the senses were reacting compared to the state of your mind. And then you could practice changing your state of mind and watching how the body's biological response would then automatically change. You could start to realize the interconnectedness of the mind and the body through these machines. So there's a way in which Krishna advises that we do that in the Bhagavad Gita, to be aware of the fact that we're interacting with the world and that we should learn to tune the way we react to everything so that we don't become caught up in those energies, especially anger. Shaknoti haiva yashodhum praksharir vimokshanat kama krodod bhavam vegam sa yukta sa sukhinara. If you're yukta and you're always connected to this idea that I'm serving Krishna and therefore I should be respectful, then there's a way in which you get this power of forgiveness, power to not react to the vegas, the pushings of anger and lust. And if you can do that, Krishna says, you're going to be happy. So that's an exciting prospect. Prabhupada Priya, and then we have Madhava. I'm looking for the outside People's Party to rally. Okay, we're getting something going out there. We'll be right with you.
Related to what you just said, a few years ago I was on traveling Sankirtan and I was staying at a house of a devotee couple. They were a young, recently married couple. And I was very impressed because I saw on the wall outside their bedroom, there was this, they had it in a frame, it was a written thing, and it was an agreement that they had that we want to, and I'm just going to say this because it might be helpful for others. It said that we both agree that we want to maintain sexual purity in our relationship, and therefore, you know, at such times when passion may be running high and we hadn't been planning to conceive a child, then this is what we're going to do. And they had a whole game plan there, and they both signed it. I thought that was like pretty remarkable.
It's a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's very practical. Okay. Outside. Who's got the mic?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Krishna.
I have a reflection from yesterday's chapter 16, verse 11. It said, I found it quite interesting, the submission to curses. It gave the example of Nala Kuvara and Manigriva, that they submitted to Narad Muni's curse with lotus-like face, showing love and affection. And I was reflecting on the curse on King Chitraketu by Parvati, and he became Vritrasura, and also Parikshit Maharaj was cursed to a very severe extent, even though it was not called for. And even Gajendra, when he was a king in his previous life, he was in meditation, but Agastya Muni cursed him that you become dumb like an elephant. I was just thinking that the glory of these personalities is in their submission, that even though sometimes they were unjustly cursed, but they accepted it. And it's a lesson for us, but it's easier said than done.
That's true. Practice. And if we examine the major stories of the Bhagavatam, we can find that all of them are precipitated by a curse. That's it. That's my statement. Okay. Madhava. Madhava, go ahead.
It says here in the last word, it is in order to exterminate wicked fellows like you and to show his grace to the virtuous, that he assumes his various incarnations like Varaha. So Varaha, is he like an incarnation that he came 2 times? Is that why Varuna knew Varaha?
He came 2 times and
is that why he knew Varaha? Because Varaha comes to kill Hiraṇyākṣa, right? Like, is Varaha just a general incarnation of Krishna? How does he know Varaha?
he comes regularly.
It's a question.
Yeah. I'm agreeing that he comes regularly. As far as if he only killed Hiraṇyākṣa, will defer to Mahendra Prabhu. Okay, so we can look in the, if you can get from the library room, the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, not now, but on the break, we can look it up. And yes? Announce without microphone.
Also in the verse, Varaha is not mentioned.
What?
In the verse, Varaha is not mentioned. It only says incarnations. In Sanskrit. The translation says Varaha, but the Sanskrit...
You mean here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, outside. Go for it.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have one reflection. So in this chapter, Sukdev, they were mentioning about inauspicious signs at the time of birth of Hiraṇyākṣa and Hiraṇyakashipu. And in first canto of Bhagavatam also, Yudhishthira Maharaj observed some signs when Krishna left this mortal world. So then he was speaking to Bhima that Arjuna went back, he went to Dwarka and he didn't return back. Maybe these inauspicious signs are due to Krishna left this world. So I see some connection between these two. When demons are born, inauspicious signs are seen, and when God, who is a personification of Dharma, he left the world also, there are some inauspicious signs.
Yeah, nice parallel. Thank you. There's a new department on the academic level of omenology.
I just wanted to add something about the plan. I really like that point. and especially on the question of, he said short temper. I remember two things, and one was that with my friend we discussed once how to approach a meeting which had some contention, and then I shared that if there is some untruthfulness, injustice, I become quite upset and lose my temper, and then we must have a plan, and the plan was there will be a Q word that will be just mentioned, nobody will understand, only we between ourselves, and then the Q word was a name. That name was a famous MMA fighter who won a very difficult battle, but the other guy was very obnoxious, and he just challenged, he actually insulted him, and when he insulted his crew on ethnicity or whatever, the guy lost it, the guy who won. He just beat the judges and everybody else in the opposite crew, so they disqualified him for 1 year, and he lost the battle, etc. So he was saying, just for losing his temper, he lost everything. So that was the story. And when the meeting was going on, and then he noticed there are signs that, and then he was just mentioning this name, and then, there's a plan, don't just wait patiently, and even if there are things which are improper, they will be sorted out. So that's one thing, you can have an agreement before that some friend, spouse, or whoever gives you a clue, or a cue rather, that then you remember something which is very, and then that will be helpful. The other is to pray, just cry for help, which just reminded me the story of Shiva Thakur's wife, who once saw how a crow took the ghee vessel. Just the crow flew and threw it somewhere and came back without the ghee vessel. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says she started crying because of knowing the short temper of her husband, Shiva Thakur. She knew that he was very angry because of the Lord's paraphernalia disappeared. So she didn't know what to do. And Nityananda Prabhu saw her and said, "Wow, why you cry? I will help you." And he just called, "Crow, bring back the vessel." The crow brought it back. And so, approaching the Lord, Srila Prabhupada, for help, that also will be helpful at the moment.
Yeah, regarding your MMA idea, in the end of the 7th chapter, there's a series of statements discussing how one can disentangle oneself from various aspects of the material world. I don't remember all of them, but I do remember one which was about how one can become detached from wealth by discussing its inconveniences, the inconveniences of accumulating and keeping it. And that is indicative of the idea of having intelligence. And the others are similar. And that means if you inform yourself about the troubles of reacting with anger and what the way it turns out is normally there's an inordinate result. And if we know that and we don't want an inordinately bad result, then we're already inoculated. And as far as physical cues and mantras, I find that one of the ways that people, including myself, are subjected to our own vegas is when driving. Because there's something impersonal about automobiles on the road, and there's an assumption that if somebody is careless or seems to be reckless, even if it was a mistake, then there's a sense that you assaulted me, and oftentimes people become angry. I mean, obviously road rage is legion. The cases of it are legion in the ways that people become inordinately angry and then sometimes ruin their lives. And over the years, I've developed a technique that whenever I'm driving and somebody does something that is annoying or dangerous, I always, and whether I'm driving or Nirkula's driving on our behalf, I always say, "I forgive you," or I say, "We forgive you." Right, Nirkula? Confirmation. And it's very helpful because the mind, the vega comes up, and it's like a wave. And when there's this pre-planned reaction to it, which is, I forgive you, I just let it go, then there's a way in which it doesn't ever have the effect. It's just you let it go. And there's a story in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam that Krishna tells to Uddhava when he first speaks the Uddhava Gita. He tells about the Avaduta Brahmana and how Yadu meets him in the wilderness and then finds him to be an enlightened being, asks how he came enlightened, and then he tells of his 24 gurus. And one of his 24 gurus was the Kurari hawk, who one day the Avaduta had seen had grabbed some meat, had some meat somehow, and was flying in the air, and then two bigger hawks assailed it. And they said, give it up or die. So he just dropped the meat, and he lived. And from this he learned detachment, to let things go quickly, be ready to let them go. And maybe I already said this probably in another place, but I gave a talk at Intel, and I talked about the 24 gurus. I didn't tell all 24 of them, but I did talk about the Kurari hawk. But I didn't say he was carrying a piece of meat. I said he had a mouse. And then when the hawks came and they said, give it up or die, he dropped the mouse. And I had come back there to Intel about a month and a half later for another talk. And there was a bunch of people waiting there when I got there. And as soon as I walked in, they go, drop the mouse, drop the mouse. Because it's such a commonsensical idea that just let it go instead of trying to hold on to everything. Prabhu? Gotcha.
I was just thinking regards to these environmental problems from demons taking birth, and I was thinking about how we were reading about how the Mother Earth is overburdened by demonic and mentality, not by the amount of people that are on the earth, but the actual demoniac mentality. Prabhupada was mentioning that in the purport at least 4 or 5 chapters ago. And I was thinking this is such a wonderful way to give Krishna consciousness to our environmentalist friends out there who are working so hard about pointing the finger and preaching about things, but you can actually say, well, what are you doing? Because actually your behavior and what you're doing with your own consciousness is also causing, according to this knowledge, it's causing environmental disasters in some sense.
Yeah, the devotees in New Zealand actually are world leaders in environmentalism. In fact, organizations, when they're reporting on environmental conditions, come to the authorities at the ISKCON New Zealand temple just to get their opinion. Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Speaking in New Zealand.
Australia.
Oh, sorry. Hope that wasn't an alparad.
Just in the first verse.
That is. Okay, go ahead.
Just in the first verse of this chapter, it's mentioned that the demigods were afraid of incidents that were happening in the universe, so they approached Lord Brahma. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that the quality of fear exists for every living entity in the material world, including the demigods. So, even in the ashrams, the brahmacharis, the vanaprasthas and the sannyasis, they seem to have less fear, but the grihastha ashram is more prominent. So just in the last couple of lunches in here, I've just been speaking to a gentleman from overseas, a devotee, and he was expressing that life was a lot more. I was a lot more confident in my brahmachari ashram, but since I've become a grihastha, he's only young. He says I'm very uncertain and I'm full of fear about what the future holds. So my question is how did that sense of trust in Krishna, which is so prominent in the brahmachari ashram, because in that ashram we have so much experience that Krishna's taking care of things and we have less worries, but how is it that when we go into the grihastha ashram that dissolves and we have less confidence that Krishna will look after us and maintain us and in that regard?
Yeah, well, you don't have seemingly a lot to lose as a brahmachari. As soon as you have a vested interest in the world, then you have more fear naturally. Just like the demigods, when they were there's a contrast. When they were watching Hiraṇyākṣa fight with Nrisimhadev, the demigods were watching from behind the clouds. And when Hiraṇyākṣa got free, actually, I said it incorrectly. When Lord Nrisimhadev let Hiraṇyākṣa free momentarily, because as Prabhupada comments on the side, the cat likes to play with its food. Said that the demigods became very fearful because they then calculated that Hiraṇyākṣa's ire will increase since he saw them rooting for the enemy. And the reason they're fearful is because they had a vested interest in status quo. They wanted all their stuff, whereas Prahlad was not afraid at all. Trastosmyaham kripana vatsaladussaho samsara chakra karanad grasatam pranita badhasva karma birushattama tengrimulam prito pavarga sharanam vaisesika danu. He says, I'm not afraid, because he didn't have a vested interest in anything. He just wanted to serve. So the grihastas have to have an opportunity to then develop that sense that everything's to be used in Krishna's service, and that they can't control the outcome of a lot of things. Krishna Consciousness 101, Bhagavad Gita, is needed. And just regarding fear, just an interesting side point before we move along, and that is that in the 10th canto, 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada gives a commentary about how Devaki was fearful when Krishna was about to appear in the world, because she thought she'd lose him. And then Prabhupada says, based on the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that such fear is what purifies us. In fact, it says the fear is what eliminates the Sadgarbha Asuras, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Mada, Moha, Matsarya. And that one should transfer one's tendency to fear from the sense of losing one's own identity, or not identity, but false ego, or one's, that sounds abstract. One should transfer one's sense of fear of losing one's own things to being protective of Krishna, being afraid that, for instance, Prabhupada said that the Krishna consciousness movement can be harmed, or that Krishna might be harmed in the case of Devaki. He said such fear is purifying, so that propensity to fear should be transferred, and that's the idea. And Prahlad Maharaj said, I'm not afraid of you, Lord Nrisimhadev, like everybody else, as everybody else is. But what I am afraid of is that I'll be recaptured by Maya and fall back down into to be crushed by the wheel of time. Shall we stand up just for a Gauranga stretch? Gauranga. Quick question. What is your 4-syllable mantra? Gauranga. Okay, Radhakripa Prabhu, for the close.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, Lord Brahma has limitations when he's in the womb. We understand that he can't award the liberation, or but he also doesn't have any checks and balances when he award the. Or is it by design, or it's just because?
What do you mean he doesn't have any checks and balances?
Like, by awarding that Hiraṇyākṣa that he was seeking immortality.
He's given executive privilege. Krishna empowered him. He's almost as smart as Krishna, but he didn't have that. He can't get it over the hump of the birth and death thing.
But he's. I was just thinking about created by the two. Is that he's not foresighting what is going to happen, or it's just by design because this is supposed to happen that way?
Well, the thing is, the way the universe works is a tit for tat, and Brahma's involved in that. So Hiraṇyākṣa paid his taxes and then some. So there's a way that he was owed some respect, and that's recognized early on, that the demigods got together and said, look, there's a guy with smoke coming out of his head, and you got to go deal with it. And it turned, because he had performed the austerity, there's some reward that comes to him quite naturally. So Brahma went there, and he wistfully gave it to him, because he says in the very beginning, before he gives benediction, he said, one shouldn't take benedictions one can't handle. And the fact is, no living entity can handle a material benediction. It's a misnomer. There is no material benediction. That was one of the big lessons here. But Brahma was awarding him according what he had to do to negotiate the debt. It was a negotiation based on the laws of the universe. That's why. We're continuing with the battle between Lord Bor and the demon Hiraṇyākṣa, Golden Eye. Was that something I was supposed to read? Shadgarbhasuras. Okay. Thank you. That was very thoughtful of you. Now this is really the chapter that Samyapras likes. I misrepresented the last one. Maitreya continued. The proud and falsely glorious Daitya paid little heed to the words of Varuna. O dear Vidura, he learned from Narada the whereabouts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and hurriedly betook himself to the depths of the ocean. Materialistic warmongers are not even afraid to fight with their mightiest enemy, the Personality of Godhead. The demon was very encouraged to learn from Varuna that there was one fighter who could actually combat him, and he was very enthusiastic to search out the Supreme Personality of Godhead just to give him a fight, even though it was predicted by Varuna that by fighting with Vishnu, he would become prey for dogs, jackals, and vultures. Since demoniac persons are less intelligent, they dare to fight with Vishnu, who is known as a Jitta, or one who has never been conquered. He saw there the all-powerful Personality of Godhead in his boar incarnation, bearing the earth upward on the ends of his tusks and robbing him of his splendor with his reddish eyes. The demon laughed, "Oh, an amphibious beast." In a previous chapter, we have discussed the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Varaha, the boar. Well, Varaha, with his tusks, engaged in uplifting the submerged earth from the depths of the waters. This great demon, Hiraṇyākṣa, met him and challenged him, calling him a beast. Demons cannot understand the incarnations of the Lord. They think that his incarnations as a fish or a boar or a tortoise are big beasts only. They misunderstand the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even in his human form, and they deride his descent. In the Chaitanya Sampradaya, there is sometimes a demoniac misconception about the descent of Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu's body is spiritual, but demoniac persons consider the body of the Supreme Personality to be material, just like ours. Avajananti ma mudha. Persons who have no intelligence deride the transcendental form of the Lord as material. The demon addressed the Lord, "O best of the demigods, dressed in the form of a boar, just hear me. This earth is entrusted to us, the inhabitants of the lower regions, and you cannot take it from my presence and not be hurt by me." Sridhar Swami, commenting on this verse, states that although the demon wanted to deride the Personality of Godhead in the form of a boar, actually he worshipped him in several words. For example, he addressed him as Vanagochara, which means one who is a resident of the forest. But another meaning of Vanagochara is one who lies on the water. Vishnu lies on the water, so the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be properly addressed in this way. The demon also addressed him as Mriga, indicating unintentionally that the Supreme Personality of is sought after by great sages, saintly persons, and transcendentalists. He also addressed him as Ajna. Sridhar Swami says that Jna means knowledge, and there is no knowledge which is unknown to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indirectly, therefore, the demon said that Vishnu knows everything. The demon addressed him as Suradhama. Sura means the demigods, and Adhama means Lord of all that be, Lord of all there is. He is Lord of all the demigods. Therefore, he is the best of all demigods, or God. When the demon used the phrase, in my presence, the implied meaning was, in spite of my presence, you are completely able to take away the earth. Naswasti yasisi. Unless you kindly take this earth from our custody, there can be no good fortune for us. Text 4. You rascal, you have been nourished by our enemies to kill us, and you have killed some demons by remaining invisible. O fool, your power is only mystic. So today I shall enliven my kinsmen by killing you. The demon used the word abhavaya, which means for killing. Sridhar Swami comments that this quote-unquote killing means liberating, or in other words, killing the process of continued birth and death. The Lord kills the process of birth and death and keeps himself invisible. The activities of the Lord's internal potency are inconceivable. But by a slight exhibition of this potency, the Lord, by his grace, can deliver one from nescience. Shuchaha means miseries. The miseries of material existence can be extinguished by the Lord by his potential energy of internal yogamaya. In the Upanishads, Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it is stated, Parasa Shaktir Vivadaiva Shruyate. The Lord is invisible to the eyes of the common man, but his energies act in various ways. When demons are in adversity, they think that God is hiding himself and is working by his mystic potency. They think that if they can find God, they can kill him just by seeing him. Hiraṇyākṣa thought that way, and he challenged the Lord, you have done tremendous harm to our community, taking the part of the demigods, and you have killed our kinsmen in so many ways, always keeping yourself hidden. Now I see you face to face, and I'm not going to let you go. I shall kill you and save my kinsmen from your mystic misdeeds. Not only are demons always anxious to kill God with words and philosophy, but they think that if one is materially powerful, he can kill God with materially fatal weapons. Demons like Kamsa, Ravana, and Hiraṇyākṣa thought themselves powerful enough to kill even God. Demons cannot understand that God, by his multifarious potencies, can work so wonderfully that he can be present everywhere and still remain in his eternal abode, Goloka, Vrindavan. The demon continued, when you fall dead with your skull smashed by the mace hurled by my arms, the demigods and sages who offer you oblations and sacrifice in devotional service will also automatically cease to exist like trees without roots. Purport. Demons are very much disturbed when devotees worship the Lord in the prescribed ways recommended in the scriptures. In the Vedic scriptures, the neophyte devotees are advised to engage in 9 kinds of devotional service, such as to hear and chant the holy name of the Lord, to remember him always, to chant on beads, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. To worship the Lord in the form of his deity incarnation in the temples, and to engage in various activities of Krishna consciousness, to increase the number of godly persons for perfect peace in the world. Demons do not like such activity. They are always envious of God and his devotees. Their propaganda not to worship in the temple or church, but simply to make material advancement for satisfaction of the senses is always current. The demon Hiraṇyākṣa, upon seeing the Lord face to face, wanted to make a permanent solution by killing the personality of Godhead with his powerful mace. The example of an uprooted tree mentioned here by the demon is very significant. Devotees accept that God is the root of everything. Their example is that Just as the stomach is the source of energy of all the limbs of the body, God is the original source of all energy manifested in the material and spiritual worlds. Therefore, as supplying food to the stomach is the process to satisfy all the limbs of the body, Krishna consciousness, or developing love of Krishna, is the sublime method for satisfying the source of all happiness. The demon wants to uproot this source because if the root, God, were to be checked, the activities of the Lord and the devotees would automatically stop. The demon would be very much satisfied by such a situation in society. Demons are always anxious to have a godless society for their sense gratification. According to Sridhar Swami, this verse means that when the demon would be deprived of his mace by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not only the neophyte devotees, but also the ancient, sagacious devotees of the Lord would be very much satisfied. Not only the neophyte devotees, but also the ancient, sagacious devotees of the Lord would be very much satisfied. Sridhar Swami's reversal of the meaning. Text 6. Everyone okay? Yes. Although the Lord was pained by the shaft-like abusive words of the demon, he bore the pain. But seeing that the earth on the ends of his tusks was frightened, he rose out of the water just as an elephant emerges with its female companion when assailed by an alligator. Purport: the Māyāvādī philosopher cannot understand that the Lord has feelings. The Lord is satisfied if someone offers him a nice prayer, and similarly, if someone decries his existence or calls him ill names, God is dissatisfied. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is decried by the Māyāvādī philosophers, who are almost demons. They say that God has no head, no form, no existence, and no legs, hands, or other bodily limbs. In other words, they say that he is dead or lame. All these misconceptions of the Supreme Lord are a source of dissatisfaction to him. He is never pleased with such atheistic descriptions. In this case, although the Lord felt sorrow from the piercing words of the demon, he delivered the earth for the satisfaction of the demigods, who are ever his devotees. The conclusion is that God is as sentient as we are. He is satisfied by our prayers and dissatisfied by our harsh words against him. In order to give protection to his devotee, he is always ready to tolerate insulting words from the atheists. The demon who had golden hair on his head and fearful tusks gave chase to the Lord while he was rising in the water, even as an alligator would chase an elephant. Roaring like thunder, he said, "Are you not ashamed of running away before a challenging adversary? There is nothing reproachable for shameless creatures." Satisfied? It's too nice. When the Lord was coming out of the water, taking the earth in his arms to deliver it, the demon derided him with insulting words. But the Lord did not care, because he was very conscious of his duty. For a dutiful man, there is nothing to fear. Similarly, those who are powerful have no fear of derision or unkind words from an enemy. The Lord had nothing to fear from anyone, yet he was merciful to his enemy by neglecting him. Although apparently he fled from the challenge, it was just to protect the earth from calamity that he tolerated Hiraṇyākṣa's deriding words. The Lord placed the earth within his sight on the surface of the water and transferred to her his own energy in the form of the ability to float on the water. While the enemy stood looking on, Brahma, the creator of the universe, extolled the Lord, and the other demigods rained flowers on him. Those who are demons cannot understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead floated the earth on water, but to devotees of the Lord, this is not a very wonderful act. Not only the earth, but many, many millions of planets are floating in the air. And this floating power is endowed upon them by the Lord. There is no other possible explanation. The materialists can explain that the planets are floating by the law of gravitation. But the law of gravitation works under the control or direction of the Supreme Lord. That is the version of Bhagavad Gita, which confirms by the Lord's statement that behind the material laws of nature, nature's law, and behind the growth, maintenance, production, and evolution of all the planetary systems, behind everything is the Lord's direction. The Lord's activities could be appreciated only by the demigods headed by Brahma, and therefore when they saw the uncommon prowess of the Lord in keeping the earth on the surface of the water, they showered flowers on him in appreciation of his transcendental activity. The demon who had a wealth of ornaments, bangles, and beautiful golden armor on his body, chased the Lord from behind with a great mace. The Lord tolerated his piercing ill words, but in order to reply to him, he expressed his terrible anger. Purport: the Lord could have chastised the demon immediately while the demon was deriding the Lord with ill words. But the Lord tolerated him to please the demigods and to show that they should not be afraid of demons while discharging their duties. Therefore his toleration was displayed mainly to drive away the fears of the demigods, who should know that the Lord is always present to protect them. The demons' derision of the Lord was just like the barking of dogs. The Lord did not care about this, since he was doing his own work in delivering the earth from the midst of the water. Materialistic demons always possess large amounts of gold in various shapes, and they think that a large amount of gold, physical strength, and popularity can save them from the wrath of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Personality of Godhead said, "Indeed, we are creatures of the jungle, and we are searching after hunting dogs like you. One who is freed from the entanglement of birth has no fear from the loose talk in which you are indulging." Excuse me? Start over by Shasheka Das. The Personality of Godhead said, "Indeed, we are creatures of the jungle, and we are searching after hunting dogs like you. One who is freed from the entanglement of death has no fear from the loose talk in which you are indulging, for you are bound up by the laws of death." Purport: demons and atheistic persons can go on insulting the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they forget that they are subjected to the laws of birth and death. They think that simply by decrying the existence of the Supreme Lord or defying his stringent laws of nature, one can be freed from the clutches of birth and death. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that simply by understanding the transcendental nature of God, one can go back home, back to Godhead. But demons and atheistic persons do not try to understand the nature of the Supreme Lord, therefore they remain in the entanglement of birth and death. It reminds me, I was in Montreal at the Hiraṇyākṣa, and I was working the book booth, and this guy came up and said, "You know, this whole thing is a mental construct." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, everything you're doing here is just a mental construct. It doesn't mean anything." And we were back and forth in our conversation, and I said to him, something that shocked him, and it derailed his diatribe. I had said, "Well, anyway, you still have to die, right?" And he had such a sour look on his face, but it was sad at the same time because, and what reminded me, sorry to interrupt myself, but what reminded me here was that Prabhupada says, although people deride God or they denounce him or they deny him, they forget that they're under the control of the laws of nature. And if you say, yeah, but you still have to die, and Krishna's mrityu sarva haraschaham, there's a dose of reality enough, at least there was for this fellow, that he was shocked, and he then became indignant. And I have a picture of him, actually. I put a garland on his neck, and I took a photo. But I was just thinking how this resonated with me about how everyone's saying this, that, and the other thing. They go on talk shows and say, opine, there is no God. But meanwhile, they're going to die. And I just know from being around people who are leaving their bodies that it's a time of reckoning. And everything changes. All the intellectualism and the ways of contextualizing the world and saying this is my part in it, they all become irrelevant at that time by Krishna's grace. Right, Bana? Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Radhamanan Mohan, if you so desire, please let us take shelter of Lord Boar, who slaps the demons upside their head. Om Tat Sat. We'll see you back here at 15 after for the Gayatri break. Gaur Premanande Haribo.